Welcome to part two. I hope you enjoyed part one yesterday. Lawrence Okolie, Julian, he's having a bit of a tough time in here at the moment. Eddie Hearn, they've been going at it about a year, haven't they now?
Yeah,
What do you make of that? 'Cause normally Eddie
look,
some good.
I think I think Eddie's done a good job. I think there's no denying that. But ultimately, when a relationship breaks down permanently, which seems to be the case, you just got to move on, whether he's in contract or not. The solicitors and the legal people seem to think he's out of contract. Sky seemed quite confident about that. So sometimes just walk away from the situation, wish him luck, and Eddie says he's out of pocket because he's had to invest a lot of money into a Coley. And that I can see a point of view there, to be honest, but surely then if he's not major box office or a major draw, you're going to lose more money by keeping him. Let him go and just move on with your fighters and move on with your promotional network.
Yeah. All right. Joshua, what do you see next for Joshua, Julian?
He's going to go for the money fights. I think there's little doubt about that. He seems to be talking about changing trainers again doing the same thing. I think he probably needs to look into a mirror as opposed to look at other trainers, because the trainers that he's looking at are not going to be able to give him in a short window what he's after. And he's in a tricky situation because he's still not found himself, has he? I think that's the reality. And he's struggling accepting that there are better fighters out there with a greater skill set. We all saw the fight with Usyk and the aftermath, and trying to understand, saying, "But you beat me. But I'm fitter, I'm stronger, but you beat me." So he's got his own crisis to deal with, and I don't think it's a trainer what's going to bring him what he's looking for. So you know, he's a big draw, but right now he's not fighting, is he? He's people saying the one thing that really frustrates me about modern day boxing and Anthony Joshua in particular is all we hear, Russell, is I think he needs a break. I think he needs a break. This guy's fighting every 8 or 9 months. Are people seriously suggesting that Anthony Joshua needs a break from boxing?
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? How people like Johnny Nelson are coming out saying he needs a break and that, and he's not even active, is he?
Yeah, a break from what? I mean, you see things like he's sunning himself in this country and that country is in Dubai, you know, at the moment. He looks to be having quite a good life as far as I'm concerned, and well deserved. He's got a great wealth and he's rolled the dice. But this guy doesn't need it. Look, either take a permanent break from boxing because your heart's no longer in it, or get in there and just get fighting every 2 to 3 months. Even if it's against lower level opposition, I don't think that matters. I think what's important is that he's active, and maybe he should, rotate the gyms, but get some real hard sparring instead of everything being controlled like it was at the Sheffield Institute.
Yeah. What do you see for Derek Chisora next?
I hope Derek Chisora retires, but Derek Chisora will do what he wants. Understandably, he's had his big payout now, hasn't he? And I haven't seen the fight, but apparently it was like a brutal beating once again. So we know two things. We know that Chisora's brave but limited, and we know that Fury's head and shoulders above pretty much everybody. So that doesn't mean Chisora can't be competitive going forward, but he's got a 50-50 record in the last few years. That's not a world-class record. Yeah, he's been match tough, but at what point do you say, okay, I've got enough money now. I've got enough money so I never ever have to worry about my kids and my kids' kids. Everybody's fine, but he's got to live another 40 or 50 years with himself. And we hope that he doesn't go around talking like Riddick Bowe and Terry Norris, because that'd be just awful.
Yeah, yeah. Conor Ben. There's
Conor
enough
Ben.
said on him, isn't there, really, now, isn't there?
Look, Conor Ben will be out again, we think, in the spring. or maybe in the early summer, he will go down a certain route. They'll now say that he needs they promised the name, and obviously everything fell to pieces. Hearn will try and market him as best he can. They'll probably put him in some PR campaigns and get him doing some charity work, things such as that, to shed a good light on him. They'll do some great PR work with Conor Benn. He'll get out there. He'll have a knockover job, someone we've heard of, but still a knockover job, and then he'll be probably deliver a big name for him by the end of next year. And I think 2 fights or 3 fights post the ban, a little bit like Canelo, everything will be forgotten and everybody will move forward. And you know my views on Conor Benn. If he's inadvertently taken a banned substance, we have to give him some benefit of doubt, but ultimately you control what goes in your body. If he's intentionally cheated, and we can never prove that he's intentionally cheated, then like all performance-enhancing drugs cheats, I would ban them for life. But once again, Russell, how do you prove that someone's cheated?
Yeah. I see where you're coming from. Daniel Dubois, what do you think for him next?
Dubois is, as I thought, is massively limited. For me, he's a domestic level fighter. Anybody who hears that would say you're talking absolute nonsense. Well, if Danny Dubois was around, let's just say when Gary Mason was around, Gary Mason would have punched holes in Daniel Dubois, and Mason was a British stroke European level fighter with a padded record himself, but it was tough, he was durable, and he had heart, and he's certainly a better fighter, I think, than the likes of Dubois. Why am I bringing Gary Mason up? Because I'm just putting everything into context like I do. They're talking potentially about Dubois fighting Usyk. Obviously, that if we move to Usyk and Fury, if Usyk wins that fight, I'd cringe at what it would do to Dubois. But that's not to say Dubois is a bad fighter. It just means everything's about levels, as we know. Dubois, for me, again, is a domestic level. And I think there are fighters out there who would just beat him quite easily. I don't think he's that good. I think Shane McGuigan's doing a good job with him. But we saw the vulnerabilities, didn't we, in his last fight, or those who saw it saw the vulnerabilities. But I heard about it. It doesn't have a great chin. It doesn't seem to like getting hit back. Nobody likes getting hit, but some fighters enjoy it a lot less than others. I think Dubois will get... It's a little bit like... I'll get criticised for this because a lot of people liked Herbie Hyde. But Herbie Hyde had to be manoeuvred really carefully, didn't he, during his career? Very, very carefully. And he had some horrendous knockover jobs. But everybody knew when Herbie Hyde got hit on the chin, he would go over. I remember the fight with Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe knocked him down 6-7 times, and half of those knockdowns never even connected. He just kept falling over. Klitschko put him to kip. Nothing wrong with that. And I think Dubois is in a similar bracket to Herbie Hyde. He doesn't have that sort of... He's not as good a mover as Herbie Hyde. He doesn't have Hyde speed, but he's a big puncher with fragilities, with questionable stamina. So you have to match him really, really carefully. And they almost got it wrong a couple of weeks ago. But this is what I said before to you, Russell, about, Joshua and everybody else. If you put someone in the position to fight for world titles or whatever belts these are, at some point, you're going to have to get a real dangerous fight, and you're going to get badly, badly exposed. And I think that's going to happen with Dubois.
You reckon, yeah?
Massively.
Yeah. Okay. The WBA have took Jake Paul under the wing, haven't they? You've seen Bernard Hopkins giving him a belt. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I saw the link. It was quite awkward, actually. I mean, Jake Paul seemed a little bit embarrassed about the situation himself. And for me, again, I'm old school. Everybody, knows what I'm like. I'll be a bit dour where this type of thing's concerned. But if I look at, if we go back to 1982, and this isn't Jake Paul's doing, this is a WBA. So in 1982, Dooku Kim fought Ray Mancini for the WBA Lightweight Championship of the World. And Kim died shortly after that fight. It was put into a coma. and it was such a sad thing. And that was one of the things that prompted the governing bodies to move from 15 rounds to 12 rounds. Why am I bringing Dooku Kim up? Because he's a guy who lost his life fighting for a WBA world title. Probably meant everything to him and his family. And then we're now in a situation where they're just giving the belts away. I know it's not a world title, before anybody jumps in the comments and says, but they're giving him a WBA belt for him to put in his home. This is the same belt that people lost their lives fighting for this belt and other belts, and people are getting given them. And this goes back to what I said recently on here, Russell. We'll get to a stage where everybody gets to fight for or win some kind of title or other in boxing. And what about all those fallen soldiers, in the past who have fought with such dignity and then never got close to world titles? I always go back to the Tommy Fars against Joe Louis, the Don Cockels, those brave soldiers who battled hard for belts. And now we've got YouTubers who are just being gifted belts by the organizations. It's a bit of a crazy, cringe situation, really. We must be so desperate to attract eyes onto this sport that we're giving belts out to effectively celebrities now.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? What do you think of Anthony Yard's challenge against Beta Beef?
I like the fact he's going in against the fire. Beterbiev and Bivol, they're outstanding light heavyweights, aren't they? They're both real superb fighters, and I don't rule out Yard's chances completely. Just like a lot of people are just ruling him out, and I'll tell you why. Beterbiev, you got to have a real physical presence to be able to handle that guy. He's so strong. He walks you down. He's a wrecking ball puncher, and he's going to put it on you. Now, Anthony Yard, he's physically very, very strong. I mean, if you look at him, he's got an Adonis-like body. He's huge at 12.5 stone, and he's got a lot of heart. He's a big puncher himself, and I think he's going to lay it on the line, and I think he's going to give Beterbiev a really good challenge. I don't think he'll get blown away. I think it's unlikely that he'll win, but I expect him to give Beterbiev his toughest challenge.
Yeah, it's going to be an hard one for him, isn't it, Anthony Yard?
It's a very physical fight.
Yeah.
It's such a physical fight.
I always tell that story about say sparred him, Beterbiev, and with big gloves on, we were lifting him up in air with body shots. And Ashley Safe were heavier than light heavy at the time, even though we were light heavyweight. We were lifting him up off the floor with body shots up close. You know what I mean?
Such a wrecking ball puncher, but we've had massive punchers through history, and there's two schools of thought, and people will always say with a puncher, you kind of move away from a puncher. Well, it depends what type of puncher you're dealing with. But sometimes you got to push that puncher back. If we think, for example, Mike Tyson, so Buster Douglas boxed Tyson. He pivoted, he used the ring, and he boxed in circles against Tyson. But if you look at Evander Holyfield against Tyson was slightly different. Holyfield spent a lot of time physically matching Tyson in the exchanges, pushing him back, changing the angle, doing the pivot, doing the little small circle, and put Tyson on his heels. So it's not an impossible ask for Yard to be able to do that. And if you move away from a fighter like that, you're going to be on the end of the shot. So if I was training him, I'd be looking at getting really, really tight and tucked in and pushing back. That's what I would be doing. Push the puncher back on his heels and take that momentum away from him. I think that's the way to beat him. Easier said than done, of course.
Yeah, it is. What do you see next for Paul Butler? Obviously, he's just fought Inoue Ioane in Japan. Do you see him making another run at it?
Well, first of all, he's gone up against the absolute best, hasn't he? One of the 3 or 4 best fighters in boxing right now. Yeah. Inoue is an absolute is a wrecking machine. So there's nothing to lose with taking a fight like that. I think I heard a lot of negative comments about the performance, people saying he literally went in there to survive. But sometimes you have to adopt the right game plan against someone like Inoue. And, as I've just said, you push the puncher back, but you've got to have firepower to be able to do that. And Yard might be able to do that with BTBF. But Paul Butler hasn't got the firepower or the physicality to be in a physical fight. So he adopted the right tactics and he just got well beat by an absolute wrecking machine. Can he come back from that? Absolutely. But this is the second or third defeat that Butler's had now. And sometimes you say, do you know what? I've earned a lot of money. I've done what I set out to do. And it might be time for him to think about the next phase of his life. Or he might be up for it. And sometimes fighters move up a weight division, don't they? They say, I'll tell you what, I'll jump to the next division, see if I can get in some exciting fights there. But credit to Butler. I thought Gallagher had the right tactics coming up against that type of tank with the skill set Butler had. And I hope he got well paid. I've not seen the purse fees for that one, but I'm hoping he got very, very well paid for that.
Yeah, I wish Paul Butler good luck.
Good guy.
Eubank against Beefy.
Good fight. You know what? That is a much better fight than Eubank against Conor Benn. So much better fight. I'm leaning towards Eubank in that fight. Quite a few people I speak to are thinking Beefy might just beat him down the stretch. But I think, the old adage that styles make fights runs true for me in that one. And I think I see Eubank beating Beefy Smith. I think he'll beat him on points, but I think it's going to be a really, really good fight.
Yeah. Oh, don't you say a knockout then?
No, I think it's got 12 rounds written all over it. Beefy Smith, he blocks a lot of shots as well. It's not just that he, is strong and durable, but he has that really high hands. That's that kind of Gallagher style with a certain type of fighter. He walks forward, he's got decent feet, he's got good balance. And if you're Eubank as well, when you're hitting a guy who's got that real high guard and you're hitting him high on the gloves or on the forehead, that takes it out of you as well. That hurts the hands, does that? It really hurts the hands. But I just thought, even though Beefy's last fight was a bit of a strange one and the guy wanted a way out, I thought there was just a quarter of a step in Liam Smith's game that he'd lost. I think that comes with all the miles on the clock and his age and stage. It's not just the age, it's also the stage. And I think Eubank will be a little bit fresher. He'll have a little bit more wingspan, a bit more range, and he'll do just enough damage to win a close decision. But I think that's going to be a thrilling fight. And it's pay-per-view. I've got mixed feelings about that one. But having said that, I will certainly be paying for that one.
You're looking forward to that one, aren't you?
Brilliant fight. I love fights like that. You can dress them up as much as you want and you can have whatever belts on the line. To me, these are high-level domestic fights. This takes me right back to Tony Simpson, Mark Kaler, Sylvester Mitty, Lloyd Dunnigan, all those domestic level fights. This takes me right back. And I think people always say I'm a little bit dour and withdrawn when it comes to boxing. When you get the right fight and the right styles, I get seriously excited about boxing. I think it's going to be a cracking fight. I think Sky have pulled an absolute genius move there by salvaging from that mess with the Conor Benn situation to come up with this fight. And you know what? These are fights that 4 or 5 years ago, whoever was promoting Beefy and whoever was promoting Eubank, because Eubank's not the easiest person to deal with. These are fights that just wouldn't have happened. But there's something right now, isn't there, about Sky, where they're just making these matches that we all want to see. I think it's fantastic for the fans and for the sport.
Yeah. What do you see happening with Dylan White next?
I mean, he'll get the Joshua fight, won't he? I didn't. Again, I keep saying this. It's almost become like a caveat, but I didn't see his last fight, so I can't comment on whether it was a controversial decision or not. It certainly sounded that way. But White is now looking for the big cash out jobs. He's had the massive payday against Fury, and I think Dillian White will fight Joshua. He'll get knocked out again, and then what we'll have is Anthony Joshua Mark III will be born, and they'll tell us that he's seen something new in his game. But I think Joshua knocks out White all day long. And you know what? I'm not being critical, but I've said this about. I've been consistent whenever you've asked me about Dillian White, Russell. I've never seen this pay-per-view worthy and this elite heavyweight tag that always seems to come with Dillian White. If you look at his last 4 fights, he's been knocked out cold twice and he's won a controversial decision, and then he's got a win. So these are not great statistics, are they?
No, we've been sold a lot of old tosh, haven't we, with him?
Yeah, I think he's average at best, albeit very wealthy. Very tough, he's strong, he's physical, he's got heart, he'll mix it up, he'll get into a fight. He's given some really good fights over the years. I thought, I'll never stop repeating this, I thought the effort versus Tyson Fury was awful. I know that Fury made him look ordinary, but there was never a moment in that fight where he just sucked it up and let everything go. He just got dismantled and he just looked happy to be there, didn't he?
Yeah. Dennis McCann. I know you're a fan, aren't you? What do you see him doing?
I love a slick southpaw. People are wanting to move him along quickly. Do not move this kid along quickly. There's always this is what happens when you expose people in a wide way. So McCann's a prospect that everybody's like excited about and everybody's talking about. And now we get these prospects under the spotlight. He's just a kid. He is, 23, 22. He's a kid. You can see he's not got his physicality just yet. He's absolutely fantastic when it comes to his skill set and his skill level. Let's give him 12 to 18 months before we even think about moving up to fringe world level. He's got world champion written all over him. There's a few boxes we need to see ticked. As I've said, his physicality is not quite there, but he's a brilliant kid. He's got a brilliant personality. He works hard. He lives for the game. But why do we insist on rushing all these fighters? Just when someone looks like they've got a futures tag, written all over them, we just insist on pushing them hard and hard and hard. Let the lad learn his trade, let him develop, let him grow, and give him some time before we move him along. Because if you move him quickly, he'll just get exposed. He's not ready yet, but he will be ready when the time comes if he's matched correctly.
Yeah, good luck to him.
He's brilliant.
Crawford against Spence. Are we going to get it, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the thing about that fight, I'd love that fight from a purist and a technical point of view. I don't think it would be a great fight, by the way. I could see it being a chess match. I can see it being something it's got 12 rounds again written all over it. It's got a razor-thin scorecard written all over it. But ultimately, what do we want to know? We want to know who's the best welterweight in the world. That's what we want to know as fans, boxing aficionados. I think it's a brilliant fight. I think Crawford's ever so slightly the better fighter. He's more technical. I think Spence is a little bit bigger naturally, and I think that might make the difference in the fight. But I'd love to see that fight. So let's hope that Spence isn't involved in any more kind of car crashes before that fight happens, because he seems to he's not as good a driver, is he, as he is a boxer.
No, he isn't. He's a strange driver, and he's always crashing, isn't
he? Yeah.
Lightweight, it seems to be. We seem to have a lot of people saying that best lightweight. You know what I mean? It works at the moment.
Lightweight's a brilliant division, but what happens with a lot of fighters is that because there's so many belts available now, is they kind of hover amongst from lightweight to junior welterweight or super lightweight, don't they? I think Tank is doing exactly the same thing. We've seen some really good fights at lightweight. You know, we've had the Kambosis against Lopez. We had Lomachenko against Lopez. Devin Haney's looking absolutely brilliant right now. Haney, I didn't think had the kind of quality that we've seen in his last two fights, so he's surprised me slightly there. I think lightweight looks brilliant, but I want to see Garcia and Tank. That might end up being at super lightweight or light welterweight, whichever you prefer to call it, 140 pounds or 10 stone. I think that's a great fight, but I want to see these fights happen now. We might see more simply because Tank has left Mayweather Promotions, hasn't he, or Leonard Ellaby, and he's more or less a free agent. But I think that's where the talent lies in boxing right now. You know, the top 10 lightweights in the world is just from the top all the way down. It's got so much talent in there and so much potential. And I've always liked that division. It's always been lightweight and welterweight for me have always been my favorite divisions because you get the skill set, you get the pace, you get the power, you get the action, you get everything at lightweights. And if you look back at some of the fantastic fights we've seen from 9 stone 9 to 10 stone over the years, just unbelievable. So I want to see some big fights there, Russell. I'm not that bothered which ones we see. You know, put Lomachenko in there, put Lopez back in there, who's kind of questionable at the moment, to be honest. Haney, let him fight everybody. I think, who do I think's potentially the best of the lightweights? Probably Shakur Stevenson. He's just skill level. He's unbelievable, is that kid?
Yeah. The Gad, he seems to be everywhere, doesn't he, at the moment? What's going on with this man? What he's
People love him.
asking people if they've had showers. He's asking big heavyweight boxers if they've showered.
Well, the Gad is a clever guy, isn't he? I think it was kind of an awkward question. When he first asked that question, he was like, oh, it was a bit awkward. I've been ignored. I'm going to ask the question to just try and make this awkward situation go away. But what the Gad is very clever. He's a very sharp guy. You know, he's an educated, smart man. And there's a saying that when you get insults or when you do something awkward, what you're trying to get over, the best way to get over it is to own it and to repeat it and to use that label. So it's kind of become that cringe thing that he did, and he's going to start using that as almost like a little gimmick that he does. Very clever. He does know his boxing. He gets a lot of inside information. I don't know if fighters like him or patronize him or humor him. I guess it doesn't really matter, does it? But he's just one of those, isn't he? He's a Marmite character. But what I will say is, no matter what I say, I think he's entertaining actually, and it's a kind of a weird thing, isn't it? If you think about the fact that IFL are constantly interviewing the Gad, what you've actually got is journalists interviewing journalists. I think that's quite a unique thing that we've got now in boxing.
Yeah, he's a strange old character. He's Bricktop back on his perch.
I think he's back on his perch right now. It's, you know, I don't follow football, but what I do know is that today's massive
league as well, aren't they?
Yeah, it's one of them, isn't it? Look, it's boxing promoters is like everybody else. You know, you're only as you're only as good as your last promotion. So right now, Frank Warren's flying high, and it's like the football season. At the end of the season, there's a transfer window, and that transfer window can really change the face of football the season after. But that happens with boxing. So if Eddie Hearn goes out there and makes 3 or 4 massive signings, the landscape changes. If he loses 2 or 3 more fighters, like he has been doing lately, then the landscape changes. But what we do know is that the Warrens and the Arons, I mean, they can't go on forever, although Bob seems to. What we do know is that these guys have been around it for so long, you can't get rid of them. And whether Eddie's got that longevity in him, I don't think so. But Frank right now is number 1. I think Sky, I've got the platform, and Ben Shalom is the dark horse there. We know that Sky are talking about a couple of announcements. I think is it this week? It might be in this week that Sky says we're going to do a couple of signings this week and we're going to announce them. I think we can all guess who those two are going to be, and that again will change the kind of picture of who's number one or not.
Yeah, it's crunch times, isn't it? Because they're all going at it, aren't they?
Yeah, and the thing is Sky's such a massive platform. Obviously, it covers all sport, but they've got really deep pockets and they've got that portfolio and that track record. Whereas DAZN, yes, they're owned by a guy who's worth 80 billion or something like that, but DAZN, there's only going to be so much that they invest in the UK. They're in a real difficult situation right now, and you see now a three-way battle, aren't you, for that supremacy? But competition's always good. It's never good to have a monopoly. Matchroom did some brilliant things early doors with Sky and with boxing, and then once they'd really established, and once they'd established that monopoly, it became very samey, didn't it? And very safe. So this makes things a little bit more exciting.
Yeah. Where do you see Eddie's role in all this with DAZN? Do you think he might be on the slide?
I think DAZN is globally, it's a huge entity, and they've got some, apparently a lot of success in the States and all over the place, Australia, everywhere else. But if you look at DAZN UK, because that's our interest, isn't it? We're only interested in the kind of the UK landscape, if you like. I think he's in a really difficult situation. So he's losing world champions left, right, and centre. There was a time when he had 7 or 8 British world champions. So Josh Warrington's just been beat. The Conor Benn situation, we all know what that one is. It has Katie Taylor. I don't know how Katie Taylor stands contractually, but Katie Taylor's at a certain stage in her career where she's not going to be hanging around for that long. Anthony Joshua, when's he going to fight again? Is he going to fight in the spring? Is he going to fight in the summer? Is he still searching for that kind of that halo effect? I don't know. I think there's not a lot of excitement right now, and this is one of the things what's interesting about the Lawrence Okoli situation, with Eddie Hearn allegedly saying gives us £500,000 to buy yourself out of your contract. If you're Eddie Hearn, I know there's a principle involved here, but if you're Eddie Hearn and you're DAZN and you're desperately trying to cling on to a fighter like Okoli, who you say it's like watching paint dry, is really hard to market. How much are you struggling for main eventers in the UK when you're trying to keep Lawrence Okoli? So that's a really difficult situation. And I think we all know what's going to happen with Dalton Smith, who's probably one of the best prospects in world boxing right now, certainly in the UK. I think Dalton Smith will be maybe part of that announcement. Okoli will be.
Dalton Smith and Okoli, isn't it?
It's got to be Smith and Okoli, and maybe there's someone else I don't know. But it's written all over them. And, what would you do? I'll ask you this question, Russell. Matchroom have done a good job for Dalton Smith. He's been matched well, but he's not known to the mainstream right now. If you were Dalton Smith and Dalton Smith's team, what would you do?
I'd go to Sky.
Absolutely, and that's what I would do. So it's the right thing to do. He'll get the big opportunities there, but he'll also get that platform, won't he? He'll get the viewership instead of boxing on an app that not many people have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one, really, because Dalton Smith's been with him, and from day one, he probably felt a bit awkward leaving, but that's why you have your management team, innit?
Well, you have a management team, and as we've said before, Eddie Hearn will always do what's best for Eddie Hearn and for Matchroom. So Dalton Smith and Lawrence Okoli and everybody else will do what's the best for them. That's how life is. That's how it goes. And Eddie's a businessman, and he'll understand that.
Yeah. Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, does it happen?
I don't know who's the biggest YouTuber and who's the real fighter between the two, and I mean that respectfully. So if you look at Tommy Fury's had one fight this year. He boxed in April. The other fight was an exhibition, so let's forget that. So I like to look at statistics. Statistics are important. So when Tommy Fury turns around. This is not a criticism of Tommy Fury. There's two issues I've got with Tommy Fury, and I'll go on to the next one. The first one is the inactivity. You keep saying, I've been doing this all my life. I've been boxing all my life. Well, first of all, you had 10 amateur fights. So that's like less than I had. So you're absolute novice in the amateurs. So you weren't that committed as an amateur. And then you're saying now, if you look at him, he's had 8 fights in 4 years as a professional. Now, 8 fights in 4 years is a joke. If anybody says he's got all the time in the world, he's only a kid, blah, 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 it doesn't matter. You know, if you look at Ali and Patterson and those guys, they're winning world titles at 21 years old. Yeah, but that's by the by. So his inactivity is a big issue. The second thing, well, I saw something recently with Tommy Fury on. It was a day in the life of Tommy Fury out of camp, and he opened this cupboard, and he got more protein powders than I've ever seen any professional boxer have. So Tommy Fury, he's got a sweet tooth. He loves the protein powders, and he made a comment, and he says, "I'm not having to make weight at the moment, but when I have to make 12 stone 12, that's completely different. I cut out all the niceties." So I'm thinking, 12 stone 12. So that's a new weight division, Tommy, because I've never heard any fighter being 12 stone 12. If you're not a light heavyweight, then you need to move up to cruiserweight. But you can see with the amount of protein that he's stacking, he's never going to make light heavyweight. He carries way too much lean muscle. So he needs to make a decision. One, are you a full-time fighter? And two, if you are a full-time fighter, what weight division you're campaigning in? And the fact that he's constantly calling out the KSIs and the Jake Pauls and everybody else, and they're calling him out, to be fair, that tells me is about the celebrity status. Because can you imagine if you think of, all right, let's say Brendan Ingle, yeah? We'll go to Brendan Ingle back in the day. So Brendan Ingle's got Nazim Hamed, and Nazim Hamed turns around to Brendan Ingle and says, "Brendan, I'm going to take a couple of years out of boxing, and I'm going to go on a reality TV show called Love Island." What does Brendan Ingle say to Prince Naz?
Well, you won't be impressed, would it?
Well, you see, are you a boxer or are you a celebrity? Because if you want to do that, there's the door. Go waste somebody else's time. So you've got fighters who are claiming that he was only a kid, he was only 18, 19, but you've got fighters who are claiming that they're true, dedicated professionals, and he's fought once this year. Before anybody says this is hate and start saying he was injured and fights got cancelled and wasn't his fault. It was an exhibition last time. Well, it was his fault because I've never heard in my life 2 fighters having 2 contracted weights. I have never heard in 35 years involved in boxing of 2 fighters having different weights in their contracts. So it just proves what a big joke this all is to Fury. He's got no intention of fighting for domestic titles and following Tyson, his brother's footsteps, of being a seriously dedicated professional. So, you know, the rest of the Furies are jumping on the bandwagon now, haven't we? They're all turning professional, whether they've even had fights or not. And that's not a criticism. It's just me being honest. And it says, look, do you want to be rich? Do you want to be famous? Or do you want to be a professional fighter? Because if you want to be a dedicated professional fighter and win titles, then you got to fight. You got to be active, and you got to, you know, it's not happening, mate. It's not going to happen for him.
I agree. Well, listen, it's been great, Julian. We'll get you on again. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. You take care. Thank you, everybody, for watching. See you later.